Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I know it's getting late. Well, certainly late for me, but I've been noodling on this code engine library. And, you know, one of the really cool things that code engine unlocks is the ability to hit APIs, but now we have to start like writing a ton of code in code engine to kind of make it work. And where we left off in the last video is we were looking at a function called getAllGroups. And I hinted that getAllGroups was a function that featured, or an API that featured pagination. So let's take a quick look at that. If you haven't seen I'm confident you've seen pagination before. You probably just maybe didn't recognize it. So here we are. We're looking at groups in the admin section. Let's go find the groups list. Group list? Group list. Let's find that group list API. So here it is. You can tell it has pagination because it has these parameters. Limit is 50, offset is 0. And because it has these pagination parameters, what it tells us is I'm like, well, if I just ran this query once, by default, it would just retrieve 50 rows. But what if I have 51 groups or 200 groups? Or same with users, same with data sets. What if I'm hitting an API that has pagination? All right, so that's what I kind of went out to solve with my looper function. Now it's not sexy, it's not fun. You could probably just copy paste this code if you wanted and have the same outcome. But a lot of Domo's APIs, and frankly a lot of APIs everywhere, have pagination built in because like if I have a 1,000,000 row data set, Domo's not just going to hand you a 1,000,000 rows just because you said query data set. They're just going to hand you 50 or 100 rows at a time because that's better for the API framework. So how do we handle this? A lot of the stuff is still the same. So I'm still passing in my account name, which is a surrogate for a Domo instance, and the access token. So that's going to handle authentication. URL is obvious. I'll talk about loop config in a moment. Method is method. Okay. One of the challenges of pagination is not that there isn't a standard, it's just there's at least two ways that it's commonly done. One method of handling pagination is to send the offset parameters in the body. So you'll send a post request, and in the body of the post request, you'll say, I want to start at row 500 and pull the next 50 records. Alternatively, you might set it as a query parameter in the URL, which is what we're seeing here, where we're seeing in the URL, we're saying, here's this parameter, limit 50, offset 0. So our looper function theoretically should be smart enough to do the right thing. Or I could have written two functions, loop params in header, loop params in body. That probably actually would have been easier to read, but okay. This next bit here, we're going to have to get careful about language because offset, limit, and maximum and skip. Okay. So loop until end is my trump card. By default, I'll say false, but you have a switch that says, no matter what, keep looping until you stop pulling rows. That's one way of handling looping, right? And in that regards, we'll say, all right, so our limit is 1,000 or 30 or whatever the number is. And that just says this API only allows us to pull 50 at a time or only allows us to pull 30 at a time. So limit how many rows I pull at a time. The skip parameter will say, hey, start at row 0. The next time I run this API, skip and start at row 50. The next time I pull this API, skip and start at row 100. And of course, the skip and the limit are going to kind of work together there. And the maximum is going to be, hey, you know what? I know that for my use case, I just need 1,000 records. So the maximum number of records I want you to retrieve is 1,000, or whatever the number is. And then I've got my debug API that lets me see what's happening in the API, and I've got debug loop, which will give me some printouts to make sure I don't end up in an infinite loop. Because while I was developing this, frankly, I did. All right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes. For those of you who are not super versed in Python, it's considered poor form to set your default value as a mutable object. Whew, big words. What does that mean? So something like string, that's not a mutable object. But something like the offset parameter, which is going to be a dictionary, sometimes people will say, okay, I want my default value to be an empty dictionary if you didn't provide a dictionary. And unlike setting the offset parameter in the body to a Boolean value, true or false, this is a value, and this is passed by reference. And anyway, long story short, this is a mutable object. You shouldn't do this. So instead, what we'll do is we'll say your default value is none. And then inside of the function, we'll say, hey, if body is not of type dictionary, so if it's none, then body is equal to an empty dictionary. A more common way you'll see this, and this is what I would have written if I wasn't using CodeEngine, is I'll say body equals body or. And so what that says is, if body has a value, so if it's a dictionary, then use it. But if it's none, none will evaluate to false, and so then it will default to using this value here. I think this is a cleaner way of writing all of this. But frankly, I don't understand how CodeEngine passes default values. In fact, I'm pretty confident it's doing weird things, or at least unexpected because I don't understand it. And so I prefer this test to say that body has to be a dictionary, and I'm pretty sure Domo's not making up dictionaries. So that's why I did this test this way. Okay, down here it's the exact same thing again, but this time the offset parameter. What this allows me to do is it allows me to say, hey, most APIs call offset offset and limit limit. But some APIs call offset skip. So to make sure that I can always parameterize it, you, the user, when you define your loop function, will say, hey, the offset parameters are called offset, or the limit parameter is not called limit, it's called filter or something, and you can handle it that way. All right, coming down to here. First thing we're going to do is instantiate the objects that exist outside of the loop that I need to play with once I finish the loop. So I'll create a variable called result. I'll create an empty list, and I'll set my default is loop to true. Cool. This bit here, again, keep in mind that the maximum just says what is the absolute maximum number of rows you want to retrieve at the end of the day. Let's say I'm doing a data science use case and I need to take a random sample, and I know my sample size should be 500 rows. But I can only pull 50 rows at a time. So the maximum is 500, let's say. So this says, if the maximum has been provided, 500, and the maximum is less than or equal to the limit, then set the limit equal to the maximum. Let's go with a smaller number. Let's assume that my API, in this case, my API can pull 50 rows at a time. But let's just say for the random sample I only need 10. So I would say my maximum is equal to 10, my limit is equal to 50. So let's see, Does the maximum not equal 0? True. Is the maximum less than the limit? Yes. And did I not pass the trump card? Loop until end. Okay. So then set the limit to 10. And so then when I run my my get request here, this limit will be 10, and so from 0 it will only pull the first 10 records. All right, that's just some math there. All right, let's get into our loop. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to destructure any of our fixed parameters into a new dictionary called parameters. Fixed parameters would be things like if I had like filter criteria or stuff that I was passing into the body of the API, and they don't change even as I change my limit and the offset. Like I said earlier, there's two ways of handling the offset parameters. They can either be in the body or the header, and so parameters go to the header. Otherwise, the parameters go to the body. And so I'm just saying, grab the offset parameters from here, and then update the body or the query parameters as appropriate. I have my if debug loop statement that will pretty print some kind of stuff to help me, again, manage my infinite loop if I get into one. And this part is pretty straightforward. I'm just calling getData, which is that function we just described in the previous tutorial, which is just my generic, like, how do I handle authentication? How do I hit a Domo API? So this will just pull one loop through the APIs. Now, what am I going to do with that? Let's look over here one more time. Groups list. Oh, that's ugly. Groups list, the response is a dictionary. Sorry, it's a list. It's a list of groups. But some APIs will handle the response differently. If I go to admin summary, the admin summary is what I see when I go to the dashboard. Right? This is the admin summary API. This gives me a dictionary with 3 key value pairs: next offset, total page count, and page admin summaries. I don't care about anything except page admin summaries. So different APIs will return results in different ways, and the stuff that I actually want might be nested within a JSON. So how can I parameterize what I want to receive? And so what I've done is I've said, hey, you're going to write a function called array function that I'm going to pass the response to. And my expectation is that you're going to give me back that list of records. So for get all groups, your array function just says, hey, just take the response, because the response is the list. But as I just demonstrated for admin summaries, the array function says, hey, parse the response object and retrieve the page admin summaries field value. And that will be the list of values. Okay. So coming back to here, after I get my API results, I run my array function to get my list of new records. Now you might be wondering, Jay, why did you wrap array function inside of a object? Loop config is a dictionary where the array function has been assigned a key value pair. Okay, I did that because the Domo's CodeEngine doesn't allow you to pass a function as one of the data types. And so in order to successfully pass my array function from the in order to pass the function from where I defined it here in get all groups into my looper, I just create an object and store array function as a parameter of that object. Okay. So that's how we get our list of new records. The rest of it is just math or logic, really, to figure out, do I loop again or do I stop? Let's set some assumptions at the top as we talk through this. Let's assume that we're at skip 0 and our limit is, what do we say, 50? Okay. And let's assume that our new records is 6. So if the new length of new records is equal to 0, I didn't retrieve any new records. If that happened, we know we need to stop looping because we're out of new records. Okay, check. If the length of new records, 6. If 6 is less than 50, what that tells me is I could have retrieved 50 records, but I only had 6. So again, I'm out of new records. There's no reason to loop again because I've maxed out. Okay, so that's this first line here. And this should be most of your tests, right? Okay, here, so let's assume we have a maximum. Let's say our maximum is 10, and let's assume that we retrieved 25 new records. So let's assume we retrieved 50. Let me make this 60. Okay. So I did one pass through. I did one pass through my APIs. I can retrieve a maximum of 50 at a time, so my number of new records is 50, and the maximum for this random sampling I need is 60. So if my maximum is greater than 60, true. And my length of all rows, so my length of all rows is currently 50, is 50. If 50 is greater than the maximum, then stop, because you've retrieved too many. We shouldn't have that. Here, if the maximum is greater than 0, so our max is 60, and skip plus limit is greater than maximum. So currently, my skip is 0. My limit is... Sorry, did I adjust that skip yet? If maximum is greater than 0 and skip plus limit is greater than maximum, skip is 0 plus the limit is 50 is greater than maximum, so that's false. So this will not be, we won't hit this. We wouldn't hit this one. But what if my skip was 50? So I'm at 50, and yeah. So let's say I'm at 50. Maximum is 60. So skip plus limit, so 50 plus 50 is 100. So my next run will take me over the maximum. So what if I set a new limit then? I'll say my maximum, 50, minus the length of all of my rows is my new limit. Oof. Jesus. All right, limit is maximum minus all rows. My limit is 50 minus all rows, which would be 100. I can't remember my math. Sorry, guys. But the point here was to say that if the next run would take me over the maximum, I want to adjust my limit so I'm within the maximum. All right, let's just assume that works. Just trust me, I think it works. Okay, I have another debug statement that shows me that I'm exiting the loop, and I will run this with debug enabled. And then my final step is after I exit the loop, pass all of the accumulated rows to my response object and return the response. Okay. That was a long explanation. Sorry about that, guys. Let's run this. Okay, so I'm going to run with the loop enabled. So what are we doing right now? Here we can kind of see the debug steps. So my limit is 30 because I hard-coded it right there. So retrieve 30 records at a time. After the first execution, it retrieved 6 records. And so because it retrieved less than the limit, we know we need to exit out. And so we say, yay, success, we did the thing, and here's my response. And as I can see, the response is just the list of the stuff that I'm interested in. Now, what was interesting earlier is that admin summaries, we saw that we had to write a custom function for retrieving the page admin summaries, right? It had some extra next offset and total page count that I'm not interested in. So let's run get page summaries. I'll turn the debug on, see what happens here. So here, same story. The limit the API accepts is 30, and on the first pull, I only had 5 new records, so no need to run again, so I exit out early, and we get the thing, and then we say the response just has my page summaries. Okay, that was a pretty long tutorial about how to handle looping, but again, if you're working with APIs, you have to know how to run a loop. and you can just hit me up in Slack for this code. Yeah, good luck. Have fun. Catch you guys later.